Good morning, everybody, or good evening. It is our regular scheduled Saturday live stream. My first coffee of the day tastes a little bit like potatoes and bacon. Hey, Mysterious Shadow, how's it going? How are you? Oh, I'm doing great, thank you very much. I have been burning the midnight oil on my researches for Eberron, because I'm doing a rather involved video on the history of Eberron and what it's like. Partly because it's a hot topic, partly because I'm going to be, good to see you too, partly because I'm going to be running a Eberron campaign, the next one that I run for my my home group, which will soon to be my distance group. Ex-Poison! Hey Trey. So yeah, I'm going to be running an Eberron campaign. Also, it's the latest 5th edition release, so it's hot on everybody's agenda. And also, I want to learn about it, everything about it. So I'm studying Eberron and making videos about Eberron for the next month, the coming month. So expect a lot of Eberron lore from me as I learn it, and I drag you along with me learning everything about Eberron, because it is, I've discovered, a really interesting setting. Hey Ruben. Hey Richard, good thanks. Hey Besade. Hey Gorhath. Hey Mark, Dragon Lord, Damien, nice to see you. So today I'm going to be talking about the latest Sage Advice column that Greg Tito and Jeremy E. Crawford had. That was really interesting. You'll see I left a comment there basically plugging them for Spelljammer and Planescape. And Jeremy Crawford let a few little bits of information out which I thought were really interesting. The first important bit of information for the 11 you are watching this, I'll probably cover this again later in the stream, is that Planescape is the default planner setup that the people who are designing 5th edition are, that Planescape is the status quo of the way that they handle the planes and things like that. So they grew up playing D&D and got used to the idea of playing D&D in Planescape. So Planescape is the default cosmology of the 5th edition, which I thought was really interesting. So while at the same time we say, oh man, we need a new Planescape, really what we've got is Planescape. Planescape is now integrated into Dungeons and Dragons in its entirety. So the Concordant Planes, the Outlands, Sigil, all of that stuff is legit. That's the default. So they probably, I don't know if they feel the need to actually come up with a whole source book in relation to that. Yeah, it is time. Thanks, Gorhav. Your party just started a campaign yesterday in Eberron. Excellent. Yeah, well, I'm going to bring you some pretty comprehensive lore, because I have all of the old 3.5 and 3rd edition and 4th edition Eberron stuff. So I was poring over some stuff last night, which I thought I'd give you some information. Print Ninja for book jackets. Oh yeah, okay, I'll look that up. Is that your recommendation? I'll hold you to that. Print Ninja. Hey AJ, my friend, I actually uploaded a couple of videos to our channels. We actually started a rough script for a scripted video, and we're so happy that you gave us the advice. We love your videos. Awesome. Can you give me a link for that? Just put it in the comment section on this video, on this live stream, and I'll go and check it out. Thanks, Likens. I'd love to see your work. Really would. You didn't know about Planescape at all? Well. So Planescape is the idea is that the D&D multiverse is an integrated multiverse. And the interesting thing about 3.5 edition is, and Jeremy Crawford was talking about this in the Sage Advice, is that they veered away from that. And Eberron is a good example of how the designers at the time didn't think of the D&D multiverse as integrated. So all the different settings being reachable to each other. So Eberron is in its original writing detached from the rest of the multiverse, and there's a good reason for that, in that there were these three draconic powers, so primal entities. They're depicted as dragons in the mythology of Eberron, but they may not necessarily have been. But there's a strong hint that it is a draconic pantheon or draconic gods or extremely powerful cosmic dragons on a scale of power that is off the charts for D&D. So there were three of them. There was Kyber, there was Cerberus, and there was Eberron. And so Kyber was the dark and evil one, kind of like the Vecna version of them, who had all the secrets and the mysteries of how to tie in far planes and do lots of damaging sort of stuff. Because what they were trying to do is essentially snip off a piece or create a new universe, a mini universe that they could rule as gods, because they were sick and tired of the restrictions and things that they had back in the prime material plane with the gods and the primordials, all that bickering and stuff. They just wanted to be separate from it, so they went into the deep ethereal plane and created a demi-plane of gigantic proportions and created 13 different multi-planar planes of existence floating around a new astral sea that they created. And within that they put these 13 different moons, although there's only 12 now, which is interesting. And in the middle of that, that they were creating a new world sort of thing. But what happened was that they had a falling out, a big one, and it resulted in Kyber killing Cerberus. And this is according to the mythology of Planescape. Killing Cerberus, and Eberron reacted by encasing Kyber and stopping Kyber from doing any more harm to the beautiful thing that they created, and then created a world around itself that is the world of Eberron. So essentially it's a bad dragon wrapped around by a life-giving dragon, and then on the outside of that there is a screen created to block all outside influence, and that is a ring of dragon shards, which is the former body of Cerberus. So that's the mythology, but what it really is it's a world that's been blocked off in many ways from the rest of the cosmology. So gods and things can't get there, they can't detect it. No cosmic powers can. It's a sphere, it's a shattered sphere that's been broken off from the rest of the D&D planar multiverse, which is really interesting. So you've got a chance of playing a D&D game that is in the D&D multiverse, but it plays by its own rules. It's got its own planes of existence. It's got these own moons and things which have an astrological sort of influence on the world below. So, and there's all sorts of information which I'll be bringing you about the history of this world, which is really ancient. It's hundreds of thousands of years of history, which I'll be covering pretty quickly. Kalashtar, yeah. Your D&D room isn't very much like Joe Mangino's, which is on D&D Beyond's YouTube channel this morning. Neither is mine, though. Oh, okay. So yeah, so that was a very interesting talk by Jeremy Crawford. Basically, he was just, Greg Tito was sitting there like getting this massive 45-minute wash of lore over top of him, and asking pointed questions about how things fit together and stuff. So they talked about Spelljammer. They talked about the way that planar travel can be done between the spheres and stuff. So Jeremy was very much talking about Spelljammer in that, which was really interesting. But I got the vibe that they're talking. I'm not entirely sure we're going to get a Spelljammer supplement in the form of a source book. We may just have lots of side texts and stuff like that, which is tacked on to things like Eberron supplements and things like that, where that sort of thing is included as an option for people who want to run a multi-planar, multiversal game for a different means of travel. It doesn't necessarily need to be very detailed. They just need to cover the basics of what is a spelljamming helm, how does wild space work, that sort of stuff. And you can do that in a few pages, honestly. You can condense it down quite a bit for 5th edition. So it may disappoint a lot of people, I think, but I predict that's the way they're going to go with it. I could be wrong. Baba Yaga, yeah. Have I made or played in a dungeon inside a giant creature? If so, what creature and what was it? No, I haven't, but I'd like to. I'd actually like to. In my video that I talked about different cosmology and stuff, and I thought of a living sphere where you're inside basically a giant creature with floating around in a fantastic voyage sort of living environment. I do like that idea, and I quite like the idea of planes of the Farscape being like that. So yeah, I was working on a campaign idea for a place called the Endless Flesh. Well, the astral plane is interesting too, because it's one of the transitive planes. So you've got the ethereal plane, you've got the plane of limbo, and you've got the astral plane. The astral plane is and the ethereal plane are the big ticket items for traveling between the different dimensions, essentially. It's interesting actually that Jeremy Crawford didn't mention the word dimension once. He was talking about what is a plane of existence, and he's saying it was like a world, a separate world, but not. It's time and space are very hinky, very wibbly wobbly in the planes of existence, which is very interesting. And it's also the way that I look at the Feywild. So I think of the Feywild as not so much a world or anything like that. It's a distinct environment, but it's also a dream. It's a dreamlike quality to it as well. So yeah, it is like stepping into a fairy tale. It's very weird. That's why you forget when you come out of it. Yeah, there's some really interesting story elements in Eberron, which I'm going to be exploring as we go. The Five Nations, the continent of Argonason being a bastion of dragons. There's a really interesting story mechanic as to why the dragons are all in one particular continent, one particular place, and they restrict their movement and involvement across the world. So I'll be talking about that as well. Yeah, the gods are essentially blocked from detecting Eberron. So the powers that be are very much thought forms or constructs of the faiths of the people who live there. But there is extraplanar energy. It's artificial planes of outer planes of existence which have an influence on things, including a far realmy sort of place called Zoriat, which is very interesting. Yeah, and there are eras of, like, if you wanted to do a distinct time travel game within Eberron itself. So when I'm talking about the history of Eberron, you'll be able to take notes and things and talk about the different time periods and stuff. And there's one particular time period where Eberron was teetering on the brink of becoming a plane of the abyss in its ancient history. So Eberron's had some pretty dramatic stuff go on. And it was a world originally built by and populated by dragons. So that's something to keep in mind. There is, yeah, Boot Hill. It's old school. Just a reminder to everybody, in case you've forgotten, there is super chats available. It makes it a lot easier to find your comments, that's for sure. Just strolling past. If I have missed any of your comments, that's a very good way of getting my attention. So yeah, so the way that they've made a slight alteration to the way Eberron handles its connection to the rest of the multiverse. So essentially, they've got a tie-in through those moons, and the moons are more like the planes of existence sort of thing. But I've got to read more into it. And tell you the exact differences between the old lore and the new lore. It's a very subtle change, where essentially the Ring of Cerberus is more like an artificial construct to block the influence of outside powers. And they talk about if more dragon shards fall to the planet below from the Ring of Cerberus, it does, it open up cracks in that other powers could come through, such as Asmodeus suddenly taking notice of this world and going, "Ooh, there's a whole bunch of fresh souls there that I can exploit." Can the barrier that separates mortals and gods be broken? Yes, that's just what I was talking about. So for clerics, essentially they have faith, just like in 4th edition. You didn't have to, like, you could be a paladin who was dedicated to an ideal, and there is a bunch of faiths involved in Eberron, so I'll be talking about those as well. Different churches and things like that, the cult of the dragon below, and things like that. So there's good, there's bad, and all sorts of stuff. Plug your Patreon. Plug my Patreon. Yeah, I have a Patreon, everybody. Minimum of $1 per month. You get access to my videos in advance, and access to all my scripts that I write. Yeah, there's a silver flame. There isn't local gods in Eberron. There's local faiths, powers, and there's look at it. Okay, back in the history of Eberron, where it teetered on the brink of the abyss, what happened was essentially when the dragons spread out across the world from the original sort of genesis, and they had their first council, and then they spread out to investigate the rest of the world. There were immortal quartals, which were said to be the blood of Cerberus that formed into the immortal quartals at the beginning of time, once Cerberus had died, and then the rest of the blood of Cerberus that landed in the different environments of Eberron formed into the different strains of dragon. So the blood that landed in the swamps became black dragons, etc. And then when the dragons spread across the world, because they have draconic power, they're essentially the embodiment of Cerberus's spirit reincarnated in all these different dragons, which are mortal. It weakened the ability of Eberron itself to contain Kyber's evil on the inside, and Kyber essentially spawned demons and all sorts of horrible stuff which oozed up from below. So they have aboleths, they have aberrations, they have all that sort of stuff. And when these demon lords came out, their dragons were disorganized, basically happy and carefree. They weren't organized into any sort of empire at that stage. And the demons took over the world. But because it was separated, hey, thank you. My wizard made good necromancy undead are lawful good. Really? Yeah, that's great, Gorgath. I'm fully in favor of you playing the game that you want to play. There's good undead in Eberron as well. There's a nation of wizard elves which have an undead host which control them, which is very interesting. Thanks, Zonoff. That's nice to know. So where was I? So the demons took over the world, and it was teetering on the brink of becoming a plane of the abyss, but it just couldn't connect, right? So the abyss couldn't get access to Eberron because it was protected by the screen that created it as a demi-plane, essentially. So that allowed a extreme sacrifice by the Quartals. So essentially the Quartals sacrificed their immortal spirits to form these impregnable prisons, and they imprisoned the demon lords, which they couldn't kill otherwise. The dragons just couldn't do it. They imprisoned them in various places around the world of Eberron. So there are places where extremely evil, very, very big, bad things are locked away by the immortal spirit of Quartals, which are struggling and straining to keep these things contained for all time. And so essentially in Eberron, the powers of ultimate evil and the powers of celestial good are locked together in an eternal struggle, and therefore the rest of the world is free to go about its business and be mundane and do their thing. So there's less celestial control, and there's less demonic influence as well, but a bubbling of both. Hey, thank you. Do you know of any settings that are more akin to Rome, Greece, or the Byzantine Empire? Also thoughts on running a diplomacy game within a D&D world? Yes, I do. Ankyrome, which is a continent of up above Mazdaca on Toril, is very much a Roman, Byzantine, Greek Empire type of place. So if you can find any information on that particular part of the world, that is where you would run it if you want, and it runs on exactly the same rules as the rest of the Forgotten Realms, except the Forgotten Realms, the Faerunian pantheon is not welcome there, so they have an entirely different clergy. It may be based on coatls, which masquerade as great heroes of the people. So you can certainly run a game like that. Extra component paladin blood. Oh, really? So that's how you do it. Get your lawful good to be undead. Well, fair enough. Yeah, well, it's interesting that paladins can get corrupted into death knights through, you know, Orcus and Demigorgon creating death knights. So maybe there's a path back for them as well. So yeah. So yeah, you can run that, or you can run a Greyhawk sort of setting, because Greyhawk has got environments which are a bit like that as well. Yeah, but there's definitely places in the world of Toril where you can run a Byzantine Roman style empire type game. Although the climate up there is a bit colder, I think. So if you could have islands and things like that in the trackless sea, or yeah, something like that. So definitely possible, for sure. Fireballs for good. Hey, Ricky. Yeah, Greyhawk is also good for that. Greyhawk has got a lot of feudal kingdoms and things like that. In the Forgotten Realms, places like Cormyr are your sort of feudal kingdoms as well. Demigorgon. Well, I do say demo. Well, it's Demogorgon. 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 I say Demogorgon, but it sounds like Demigorgon. Demi. It's an interesting note as well. My pronunciations of things in Eberron may bother some people, but the creator of the game, Keith Baker, has said he's not a person who believes very strongly in there is a proper way to pronounce different things. So when I say Zoriat, that's how I pronounce it. It should be, yeah. So yeah, the 12 moons and the different planes of existence are really interesting. And one of the things I'm looking forward to making a video on is his article, The Moons of Eberron. This is Chris Perkins and Keith Baker coming up with this idea that every 28 days, one of the moons of Eberron becomes brighter than the others. And essentially their calendar of their year, 12-month year, is ruled by these different ascendant moons. So each moon has got a different influence on the world below, and people who are born under that moon, it's basically their star sign or their destiny and things like that. And the different dragon marks of the dragon houses also coincide with those moons. So people who come from a family, a bloodline with a particular dragon mark, will try and have their babies born on the month that coincides with their dragon mark, because there's a higher chance that that baby will be born with a greater dragon mark, because that influence empowers their bloodline, which is fascinating and makes really good background info. Whoa, what was that about mites? Yes, the omnipresence of gods can be broken as well. There are you can cast spells which give you sanctuary against them. Also, if their names aren't spoken or they don't have any influence in that particular area, their awareness of that area may falter. So yeah, the next vid is going to be talking about Eberron. Ricky. Yeah, I agree, Zonoff. Don't punish your players in game for out of game arguments. That's a dick move. Any other info on mites and snyads? What would you like to know? I thought that was a pretty comprehensive video on them. What else would you like to know about them? Flying X-Blade, did you participate in the quest to make a new world setting? I'm under the impression that Eberron is like Shadowrun in terms of widespread magic being a technology. Yes, it is. Hey, Lycans Die Hard, thank you very much. Hey, AJ, wasn't able to send the link for some reason, but look into a critical failure. A look into look into with critical failure. We are humble, but like your critique. Sure. I was talking about so you can't put a comment on this video. You can also go to like my community tab or something like that and leave a link in my latest comment there. I don't mind if you do that as well, for sure. YouTube may actually flag links occasionally, so it will show up in my review section, and then I'll be able to check it out. Also, you can email me as well. Anybody can email me. Yeah, just talk to your players out of game about anything that's bothering you. Don't be your passive aggressive DM and do horrible things to their character just because you want to be a dick. That's a good question, Mr. L. Does AO come from outside the universe or is a product of it? Nobody knows. Nobody knows. Not even Jeremy Crawford and the other designers of D&D are deliberately vague on it. They believe, as do I, that people can play the game their own way and they can establish that greater ecology of the multiverse in their own way. So AO is essentially he's what you would think of as a proper god, right? So their ways are mysterious. Their power is incomprehensible and unknown. The limits of their power, or whatever. Nobody really knows what the greater structure of the cosmos is, and the lesser gods, the gods underneath AO, the gods that AO raises up to basically take care of business while he's away. They're greater, the greater gods and things of the Forgotten Realms and stuff are very powerful, but they're bounded within that particular environment that they take care of. So AO, for all we know, may have powers to transverse to different spheres of influence within the multiverse, and so AO, what happens if AO shows up in Greyhawk, for instance? We don't know. Okay. Sure, Lycans. I will do that. I'm going to write that down as a post-it note for myself. Look. Critical failure. It's interesting, actually. I got a comment saying that maybe I shouldn't call my my little burbles about stuff sage advice, because Greg Tito's little show on YouTube is essentially called Sage Advice as well. But although they work for Wizards of the Coast and they've got as much right, they've got even more right to use it than I do, because it was a column from Dragon Magazine. And essentially, when I'm talking about that sort of stuff, Sage Advice is not a brand, it's more like a particular type of video on Dungeons and Dragons. It's like I'm giving you an article where I'm just giving you an editorial view on a particular topic. So I'm not trying to steal their thunder, I'm just giving you a good description in the title of what that video is about. So it's not necessarily just Dungeons and Dragons lore, it's not necessarily just a monster ecology, it's a talk about potentially anything that may affect your game. So I could be talking about gameplay issues instead of in-world lore. Dungeons & Dragons Online, Lolth steals Draken Shards from Eberron to create the Darkling in Faerun. No idea if that's canon or not. Well, when things appear in D&D, there's a precedent for that, actually, and they talk about that. When something appears in a electronic video game, it's canon unless it's superseded by something like, and also a novel, it's canon until it's superseded by something in a Dragon Magazine article, or it's superseded by the latest published source book. So essentially everything that's showing up in the 5th edition source books is now supersedes previous canon, as far as the overall development future of the game goes. So they will always go off what was last published and go from there. So they have to play a lot of skipping around stuff in 4th edition, for instance, with the cosmology and things. So they've gone back to more like what D&D was like in 2nd edition. So 5th edition is a lot more like 2nd edition and its cosmology, which I'm in favor of. Oh, it did. It did, Lycans. Sorry about that. Yeah, I definitely saw it. Ah, the greater gods of Krynn called Ao the High Father or the Architect. That is interesting. So there is definitely some crossover there. Well, there you go. Yeah. I see Locksteady and Zone Off are having a discussion there. So yeah, essentially if you've got somebody at your table who's problematic in that regard, they're not really playing by the social contract of you're there to play a game of imagination with your friends, you know. Oh, thanks, Gorath. I'm certainly not the only lore guy. There's Jordan, and there's Josh from Arcane Forged, and there's WebDM, and those various other, like there's a network of really good lore channels these days. I'm certainly just one of them. I'm one voice. I'm one of the more productive voices for sure, but I don't begrudge anybody who can't stand the sound of my voice or the way that I make my videos and stuff and wants to go elsewhere. I'm not in competition with anybody. My best friend is a big Adventure Zone fan, so shout out to Ian and Adventure Zone. I haven't got into it, but I'm aware of it. Well, there is a faith of AO in Forgotten Realms, so there is knowledge that AO exists, right? And there's an actual clergy, although they don't have any particular powers because they worship AO. AO doesn't really grant worshippers a lot of power. So you can be a cleric of AO, and you will have the regular amount of AO games. Mites, favor traps, touch attacks against big folk, ignore armor, might or Snaiad spellcasters. Mites and Snaiads are too stupid to be spellcasters unless they are sorcerers or warlocks, essentially. And warlocks would wholly take over as a mite or a Snaiad because they just don't have the will to resist. As for touch attacks and things like that, you can operate them as a swarm, which has a distinct bunch of rules. So look up the entry on like rats and things like that for swarm rules, or at least pack tactic rules and things like that. You can give groups of Snaiads and Smites special abilities like that. Thanks, Matteo. How would you handle power gamers? You can actually cater to power gamers quite well. What power gamers are generally after is a combat where they get to use all of their abilities, and yeah, they're more like D&D accountants, really. So they're paying close attention to the mechanics of their character. There's nothing wrong with being a power gamer if the DM is able to craft a story that caters to that sort of gameplay. The only real problem with power gamers or any other sort of gamer is when they think that their way is the only way to play the game and they have no patience for other people playing other types of game at the table. So power gamers will generally switch off when it's a heavy roleplay environment, like they're talking to city officials and things like that, and there's no fights and stuff going on. They will just basically zone out, and that's okay. Let them zone out. Let them use their cell phone at the table and play Angry Birds or whatever. When it gets into combat, they will fully engage in the game once again, or when it comes to time to progress their character or talk about like how their character is pulling off special combos and stuff. So you give them the opportunity to play the sort of game that they want to play, because they have every right to enjoy the game their way as well. So they're not problematic. Mainly it's just difficult for DMs occasionally to have players at the table who are less interested in roleplay, but they're interested in a particular type of roleplay that gives them the satisfaction they need for their cathartic combat situations. Yeah, that's true, Zonoff. It's easier for me to see those ones when I've got my name highlighted. Solid link theory in his Drow video is that all prime worlds have a schism in Owls that creates the Drow. It isn't just happening on Krynn yet. Yeah, that's true. That's actually mentioned in Mordenkainen's Tome of Foes. It's not his theory exactly. It's actually it's more like Jeremy Crawford's theory, which I agree with. So in the world of Kryn, the schism hasn't happened yet, and also in the world of Eberron, it hasn't happened. So elves are an entirely different kettle of fish in Eberron, which is also very interesting. Oh, you're scrolling past too fast, guys. Yeah, well, I'd go into it very deeply because I think the information needs to be in this video format that people can absorb in a different way, because not everybody's got a lot of time for reading source books and things like that. And I like the idea, like I think I didn't sort of set out with any sort of grand noble scheme of creating a resource that everybody could use. I just wanted to make, you know, videos about stuff. Originally started out making crafting videos, and then it was Gareth, the DMG, the dungeon master, dungeon crafting whiz, who said, "Why don't you make a video about the lore of talk about the lore of this creature while you're crafting it?" And so I started off talking about the lore of ropers, and then it just sort of took off from there. And now I'm talking about all sorts of Dungeons and Dragons lore, and it's become the entire focus of my channel, which I'm okay with. Oh yeah, it's definitely worth a look, Mordenkainen's Tome of Foes, Scott. Although it's got some bits in there which I don't necessarily agree with, but other bits that I do. So it's like it's the most lore-heavy game supplement. It's the most worldview establishing game supplement I think that D&D has put out for quite some time. It's like really quite involved. It's thick lore, right? So I'm reading through it page by page, and I'm absorbing information on it. There's a lot of the stuff on elves, for instance. The Crown Wars of the elves really depicts the fact that elves are not, they weren't necessarily nice to each other all the time. And the lore in Mordenkainen's Tome of Foes doesn't say like nary a disparaging word is said about the elves and their attitudes. Which I think is a little bit disingenuous, because the elven civilization fell for a reason, and it falls in different worlds all the time for a reason, because elves fight amongst themselves. They are tempestuous and bitchy. Like when it talks about how in Arvindor, for instance, the full emotional spectrum of elves is accentuated, so they have bitter conflicts and strong alliances, and you know, bouts of ennui and stuff daily. So they'll fall in love and have a duel to the death with somebody who was formerly their best friend. So it's Shakespeare all the time, right? And then in the world, the mundane world, it's a lesser extent of that, but it's still going on. So life is in an elven society, which is dominated by elves, is a soap opera of emotional complexity and people and things boiling out of control. And it resulted in wars, big wars, that damn near tore the world apart and was the downfall of the elven civilization. So also a large part of the reason why the Eleutheri, the Dark Elves, were forced underground was racism and hatred by the other elven houses because of the infighting and bickering. It wasn't entirely tied up with elven pantheons and Corellon and Lolth and all that sort of stuff. That's one theory, but the historical context in the world of Faerun in particular is different. So yeah, it may play out in different ways across different worlds, but in Faerun it played out that way. Hey Marcelia, new tattoo, next tattoo, Lolthbane or Cyric, getting Evil Pantheon sleeve done, starting with Asmodeus. I sent you a picture on Discord. Oh, did you? Cool. I think Lolth, yeah. Lolth is really cool. Cyric is also really cool. Those are all good choices. Probably Lolth. Yeah. Well, Mark, elves more so than any. I do like the section in there where they're talking about the transgenderism of elves, or the gender fluidity of elves as well. That was something that Anne Rice dealt with on, like, where you're talking about a race which lives for 700 years. Their attitudes will change widely over that time, and they go through different stages of their life where they have deeply personal experiences, where they go through transitions of life, which are very different. And one of those transitions is periods of experimentation and stuff with their core identity, which lasts for hundreds of years. So they will take on different personas and different sexualities and all that sort of stuff over that period of time. And the elves are completely fine with this. Could you have a half elf from Eberron, from an Eladrin? Yes, you can. They're essentially just like any other half elf. Hey, Dragon Ball. Nice to see you, man. I won't tell you, boss. Yeah, Lothar's pretty cool. You can have some really good sort of cobweb and dragon and spider tattoo design options. Real men get cringe tattoos. Cyric is a god of murder and assassination. So essentially, he started out as a mortal, along with Kalimvor, who's now the god of the dead. Yeah, and Cyric has done some shaking up sort of situations. Like the gods in Faerun are not static. That's the problem with having living entities as gods, not just ideals, is that they change. Tharizdun. Yeah, the Avatar trilogy. They're paving over complex history of the world because this is their way of bringing people back to D&D, so they're making it easier to digest. Forgotten Realms wasn't default before. Yeah, that's true. And I'm fine with this, really. Like I say, it's okay depicting things in a brief fashion, but when you start to contradict things, it gets complicated. Particularly if you want to build on stuff with more complicated resources later on, and you've superseded something or you've written something out deliberately, that can be problematic. We saw that with 4th edition, where too many divergences from established lore made it very muddled waters, and people generally disparaged the whole sort of thing. Like it wasn't just the mechanics of 4th edition that people took umbrage with. It was the wholesale changes to cosmology and stuff that just disconnected people quite a bit. 70, 100 years, yeah. So, and quite often a lot longer. For instance, if you're an elven druid, for instance, and reach a high level, you can live for 7,000 years. So, yeah, that's the starting point. Yeah, God of Murder. That's right. Yeah, it's a weird looking spiral. There's more gods involved. Like when I talk about the gods of death and undeath and the dying and the dead, it's a real soap opera of who's taking that mantle, because there's a lot of power involved. Avatar: The Last Airbender. No. Yeah, spirals within spirals. It's a sketchy spiral. There are more platinum dragons. Yes, that's true. There's no more multi-headed dragons like Tiamat. Tiamat's pretty unique. But there are other platinum dragons. Yeah. Well, alignment is more sort of sketchy in 5th edition, and Ravnica is districts are run by different factions, much like there are in any, like, it's a world city, so there's different districts, and different districts have different cultures and things like that. So and they have different religions, things, and the way that the magic system operates in Magic the Gathering is these different colors of magic, and combinations of colors make particular tones. There was a comment by Trevor, who was saying that if you don't combine the different colors in different ways, it makes all the 10 different damage types in D&D, which I thought was a fascinating insight. Hey, nerd gamer freak, nerd geek gamer freak. 70,000 years, yeah. A Vecna tattoo. Well, it's basically just a lich with an eyeball missing and a hand gone. Well, that's fine. You can stick with Forgotten Realm gods. Only French gods, yeah. It's interesting actually because the Forgotten Realms, the common tongue, for instance, is more like Italian-French blend. So all of those gods are kind of Italian-French, really. I only do the Mulhorandi gods. They're not dead, I tell you. Yeah, so there's been a lot of very positive feedback for my Elder Evils videos and the epic monsters, epic level handbook stuff that I'm bringing to you. So there'll be more of that for sure because I quite enjoy those. Yeah, well, essentially, Magic the Gathering and D&D blend together very well. I mean, we've already seen Innistrad and various other settings done as the Dungeon Masters Guild supplements, but we haven't seen a big printed book yet, so that's going to be really cool. I'm absolutely going to make videos on Ravnica. Gaiman's Norse mythology? No. I've got my own Norse mythology. I don't need to read about it. So yeah, this coming month I'm going to be doing a lot of. I'm going to carry on doing my demon series. I'm going to be concentrating a lot on Eberron and bringing a lot of information for people who are new to Eberron, and go into some detail about the moons of Eberron, the different planes of Eberron, the different locations in Eberron that you can adventure in, and the history of Eberron is going to be the first video that I'll release, which talks about what makes Eberron what it is. Yeah, exactly, Gorhath. I played Magic the Gathering as well, so I am very interested in it. Mainly because like the artwork and stuff of Magic the Gathering is so incredible, and the lore and stuff that goes with it is pretty cool. And I think it's largely wasted on the collectible card gaming community. I'm not disparaging the collectible card gaming community. I consider myself to be part of it in a way. But I think their lore will really take off. I think the two different aspects of the game will feed off each other if they're done in a positive way. So yeah, and it's more fun for everybody, really. Yeah, they've got a version of more Norse mythology in D&D for sure. It's interesting though that they don't have a version of Christian mythology in D&D for good reasons. Super tier planeswalker, almost godlike, although unsure what to categorize him in D&D standards. Well, he's a power, a demi power. If any of you are my patrons who have seen the video on Val Sharoon, for instance, that'll be coming out for the rest of you pretty soon. Val Sharoon found a way of achieving a demi powerhood through a deal with Talos. Essentially, Talos left a trap for high-level spellcasters and things. Yep, I played Mycelia. I played every edition of D&D apart from the original set. Interesting thing about Eberron is it had a period of time where it was ruled over by hobgoblins, the Goblinoid Empire. So we have a world where it's got ruins and stuff of a former goblin empire. And the goblins are like, we were once glorious in the days of the great Dalgar Empire. So that's really cool. Minis? No, not really. I mean, the next Kickstarter for I'm looking forward to all of the Reapers. Like I really like the Cthulhu stuff, but I'm also looking forward to their sort of primitive island stuff, which they're coming out with, Lost World sort of stuff. It's a little bit late for the Chul release, actually. I wish they'd come out with that stuff earlier, because there's a lot of dinosaurs and things. That's a good idea, Flying X-Blade. Shoot, Antion. Is there a class called the Skull Knight? I don't think so, no. You might want to check the Dungeon Masters Guild. There might be some sort of homebrew version. What was one that I saw recently? Oh, the Summoner. That was interesting. Wasn't the way I'd go with the Summoner, though. I'd go more the Diabolist Summoner if I was going to make a class. So that's a wizard that specializes in magical circles and rituals, and they have spell magic just like any other wizard does, but they actually concentrate on rituals and have more access to summoning specific creatures and things that do their bidding. So they're really good at. So they cross the boundaries a little bit. They're like an arcane druid that summons animal friends, animal allies and stuff. They've got the same sort of restrictions and things. So that's the sort of subclass that I would make. As a miniature crafter, can you think of a good way to count wounds in games like 40k? I don't know. Really, you just leave like little markers on the base of the mini, or you put like rubber bands around them, or yeah, something like that. Or just like a piece of cardboard with a different color underneath it, which counts how many wounds they've got, and you just put that underneath the miniature, so you can just take it off the table really easily. Oh, thanks, Brian. Hey, Logan. Dream mana. Is it reasonable to have 5,000 gold to be the prize for a 5-tier arena, medium to deadly encounters all the way up? What level are the characters? Yeah, that's perfectly reasonable. I mean, there's a ring in the Epic Level Handbook, which is a ring of elemental immunity to all the different elements, right? So you're immune to elemental attack, essentially, while you're wearing this ring. Elemental damage just does nothing to you from the different elemental types. And that is worth 1.2 million gold pieces. So obviously, there isn't going to be a kingdom in D&T that can afford that, right? So the only sort of powers that can afford that sort of thing are like, who was it, Mammon, I think, who's just extremely wealthy, or a Earth Dao genie. They've got that level of wealth, you know. But then there's not that many gold pieces printed in a kingdom. There's not that amount of gold floating around. So they have to do it in like gems and trade bars and things like that. Don't forget, you can like, not everybody walks around with all these gold pieces. It's just like, you don't carry a lot of coins with you in this day and age. You carry notes and things, which are legal tender for something. But those notes are legal tender in a particular area because they're guaranteed by that particular ruling body. Yeah, 20-sided dice work great for wound encounters. Wound counters, yeah, just not for like if you're playing a war game and you've got hundreds of, you know, miniatures on a table. You don't want to have hundreds of dice because you lose track. Capstone ability of any class. I don't know. Tricky question. See, I like all the different classes. I like all the different abilities. What's the most broken classes I can think of? Scions, like Psyblades, for instance. Personally, I'm not that upset that psychic powers aren't a major part of the game right now. I'm wondering really if they're even going to develop more of that. You would think so with the introduction of the Kalashtar and things like that for Eberron, that they would go further into psychic powers and stuff. But I mean, really, that would have been a perfect opportunity to put something in there that was more optional. Do you like the newest push for 5e, which forces people to spend money instead of hoarding it? It's borrowed from OSR after adventure parties. It's always kind of been like that, Christopher. Like, for instance, in the older editions of the game, you were encouraged to spend your money on your followers, your members of your retinue, the care of your horses and mounts, your care of your equipment, your keeps and your clergy and all that sort of stuff. Like you know, wizards and things would give money for spell components and new spells and things. So that's always been a part of wizards. Fighters are always looking for new equipment, and I do think that you certainly should have damaged equipment and things like that needs constant repair and things. And they're always looking to upgrade their armor and weapons and things. That's really what they're all about. 5th edition factotum. No, I haven't seen that yet. Wild Magic, yeah. Mike Mills returned to science again this week. Oh, did he? Yeah. So, yeah. It's great that he's talking about it. Like, he's sort of playtesting it in the shadows with his Mike Mills Happy Fun Hour. Super Happy Fun Hour. But I would like to see some actual concrete results of that, you know. Because it's a very small audience that he's tending to there. Serious question. I'm a furry lover and like to play animal-like races. However, I hate effective character level. What race can I play that is a cat-like but doesn't have effect? You can play a tabaxi. Are you talking about playing 5th edition, or are you talking about playing 3.5 or Pathfinder? Because you can play a tabaxi, which is a cat-like creature. It's cat-like humanoid. There shouldn't be other classes. Well, that's your opinion. Have you done a Dark Seldrain video or series? No, I haven't. I mean, there's a lot of information on the Dark Seldrain, or the Seldrain per se. The Dark Seldrain is just like a counter-revolutionary movement, you could say. They're the rejected ones. Much like the Seelie and the Unseelie. Like, the Seelie is the Fey Court and the Fey creatures of particular beauty and stuff. And the Unseelie is not really an organized force or anything. It's just the rejected ones. So the Queen of Air and Darkness kind of has this ragtag collection of creatures which are attracted to her as a power figure, but she doesn't really give a shit, you know. But I've got to read more about that sort of stuff as well, because I don't really depict the Fey realm as a highly organized place when I'm playing it. It's a patchwork of different rules and regulations and laws and things. So it's very weird every time you go into the Feywild. Quite often different. Lions. He drank the wizard's lich potion and died. Damn, that's brutal, but entirely expected. Is it possible to go from Eberron to Forgotten Realms, Toril by spelljamming or space traveling? Not really. No. It is possible to go there different ways though, but it is cut off from travel across the multiverse. So it's not connected to. It doesn't have a sphere, a firmament around it, a crystal sphere. It's actually it's surrounded by its own distinct astral plane. So it's quite different. Like, yeah, anything's possible, right? It's not possible in my game. It may be possible in yours. My game does not affect your game. What is written doesn't necessarily have to apply to your game. You can make it however you want. It says in the Eberron setting book that you can spell jam there and make Eberron yours. Does it? In the latest one? In the Wayfarer's Guide? Or is the previous one? Funniest death that you've experienced or witnessed when playing a campaign. There was an NPC who fell face first into a acidic fungus. She was a cleric of Sunni. And she had her face burnt off. That was hilarious. What are my DM pet peeves? When I make mistakes, I think that's probably my pet peeve. Like when I talk about something and then forget what I was talking about, or I forget an NPC's name or something like that because I haven't made a note about it. Oh, what happened? Saved on Nat20 wisdom save from the DM wizard suggestion said, this potion smells funny, let's taste it. Sips potion. I see. Well, we're past the hour, everybody. So unless anybody has any more questions, I'm going to carry on with my life and get on with it. Make some more content for everyone. Pretty much, it's getting towards the end of the month, so I'm kind of slowing down with my output of videos at the moment because it's been a pretty productive month. I think anybody would agree. I put out a video almost every second day, and that's not even counting all of the live streams and stuff. So I've been putting out content pretty much daily, or at least working on things daily. I've been taking off 1 day a week, which is usually my Wednesdays, which would be your Tuesdays, is usually my day off. But I'm still like reading stuff for videos and stuff in the background. The sphere is not a different universe, no. No, I believe you, man. Sorry. Whereabouts was that? You don't need to pull up the specific page number. Just tell me what book that you're reading that from, Marcelia. I'm interested. You're most welcome. Does it manifest as sign languages for target as deaf? They have a language. Yes, I do use D&D Beyond. Thank you very much. My work ethic, thanks. AJ is D&D Beyond. Hardly. Mystara. Maybe if they publish something on Mystara, I will. Oh, thank you, Brian. Yeah, I really like these chats. Like, I like the fact that you guys all talk with each other in these chats. That's really great. Make videos on Mystara? Question formulated as a question. Maybe. Hey, if you become a patron and you ask me for a video on Mystara, then I'm basically forced to make that video on Mystara. I take my patron requests very seriously. I'm not kidding. Oh, did he? Okay, hang on. Sorry, I've got to scroll up and see that. Newest book, page 20 on the multiverse. Baker says you can make it so spelljamming is fine. You can make it so spelljamming is fine. Yeah, exactly. That's just what I'm saying. You can make it your own. Absolutely. Do you know if you can add real books to your D&D Beyond account? The real books are so cool. You can. They've got a section in D&D Beyond where you can make your own homebrew content and put it in there. I haven't experimented with that, but I know that section, that some facility for homebrewing exists within D&D Beyond. What extent that is, I don't know. Yep. I mean, Jordan did a really good series on all the Forgotten Realms gods. So, really, there's a lot of really good information there. So I recommend if you want more information on D&D gods, go and check out Jordan's channel. I don't concentrate so much on that stuff. Like, the reason why I concentrated on made a video on Valsharun is because I was asked to by one of my patrons. Patron who was contract with Asmodeus. Yes. So essentially, yeah, when you become a patron of mine on my channel, I am contracted to make content specifically for you because you're paying for it. Also, and here's another interesting thing which I wanted to talk about specifically to my patrons who were concerned about this. They don't see a lot of advertising and stuff on my videos when I put them up there unlisted for them to watch because they've already paid for those videos. So I encourage the patrons to watch those videos as soon as they're posted up there, because I'm putting them there without ad breaks and stuff specifically for you because you've paid for them. As soon as I release them public, then they have the ad breaks and stuff that goes into them because they're listed on YouTube for anybody to watch for free. So take advantage of it for sure, and don't feel bad about watching those videos without adverts on there. You've already paid for those videos as far as I'm concerned, so I encourage you to watch them. Yeah, well, Jordan's videos are succinct, you know. So he's catering to like, he doesn't want to make I'm not speaking for him, but I'm just saying that he doesn't make 30-minute long videos on a specific topic and things. He'll make like longer videos on more involved sort of stuff, but he keeps those videos short and snappy and to the point, and I respect that. But we have a different style in that I'm a long play form video. So my infotainment is, it concentrates on the research and stuff and goes into a lot of small details, which is not to everyone's liking, for sure. So Jordan is a channel which is growing at the same sort of speed as mine, and he's got there's a lot of crossover between our audiences, but I also encourage people who don't find the longer form videos and the higher amount of detail in my videos as useful to go over and get, if you want the broad brushstrokes and stuff of like the drow and things like that, Jordan's video is really good for that. If you want to go into the real nitty-gritty detail of drow for like 20 minutes or 30 minutes or so, my videos are more to your liking in that regard. Or you can watch both and get different stuff that we cover from different angles. So yeah, there's no competition there as far as I'm concerned. I miss playing D&D online in chats. Well, I would suggest go to our Discord channel. There's a link in the doobly-doo. Go and check out the Discord server and play in some games there, because they have play-by-post games, they've got play-by-chat and play-by-text games that they're running there as well. So for sure, there's a little community of very avid people playing games there. And you can run any sort of game you want. I don't step in and control anything in regards to the topics of D&D games and stuff that you run there. In fact, you can run any sort of gaming system you want. Hopefully, yeah. I'll catch you guys all later. Any tips for remembering to add more detail for your players, what to focus on? I would say just keep a piece of paper in front of you and make little notes about like flora and fauna and things like that, different herbs and things that they may find. Like if they're setting up a campsite and stuff, just scatter little random details that you just make up on the spot, but keep notes on them and create a glossary of different stuff that those players may turn around and say, there was that particular herb that you mentioned before, those purple flowers with the little red bobbly berry thingies underneath them. What do those do? Like, I'm going to go and ask the local healer if those are a rare flower or something, and that could spin off an entire plot twist of your campaign that takes it in a completely different random direction. So I encourage you to add those little details in there and keep detailed notes of what you're talking about for your game, and go back and review them, and keep a Cliff Notes version of what happened in your very last session. At the end of your session, just after everybody goes home, write down everything that happened in a shorthand sort of sequential bullet point order, so that you remember what happened last session, because sometimes it's hard to recall every little detail. So yeah, that's definitely what I suggest. Thanks a lot, everybody. I will catch you again later. It's been lovely talking to you all. Thank you for all the super chats. It's very encouraging for me to carry on making these live chat videos. Yeah, it definitely helps for sure. Thanks for all the great questions. Thanks for all the help as well, for people who are pointing out lore points and stuff for me. It gives me things to think about as well. And I will catch you all later. So yeah, happy gaming. Be nice to each other. If you can't be good, be careful.